If you put that 100% tariff on top of what's in place already, you're talking about 157% tariff on
right.
China. Can that stand? I
No,
mean, what is that going to do to the economy?
It's not sustainable, but that's what the number is. It's probably not, it could stand, but they forced me to do that. I think we're going to do fine with China. I get along great with him. He's a very strong leader, a very, amazing man. I think we're going to be fine with China, but we have to have a fair deal. It's got to be fair.
And that's President Trump during my exclusive here last weekend on countering China's moves to tighten control of rare earth mineral exports. As Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent now says this morning that the U.S. and China have agreed to a framework on a new trade deal. President Trump is set to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping this upcoming Thursday on the sidelines of the APEC summit in South Korea. The in-person meeting just one day ahead of the president's deadline to impose an additional 100% tariff on exports from China, taking the total tariff on China to 157%, with a 90-day truce between the two countries set to expire on November 10th. The president also spoke this weekend with the new Prime Minister of Japan, Sanae Takaichi, who posted about it. She said she appreciated his warm congratulations and is determined to elevate the U.S.-Japan alliance. Joining me now on the high-stakes relationship between the U.S. and China and President Trump's upcoming meeting with Xi Jinping is Lee Smith, the author of the new book, The China Matrix, the epic story of how Donald Trump shattered a deadly pact, which is available right now. Lee, great to see you. Congrats on the book. What are your thoughts going into this meeting with Xi Jinping?
Thank you so much, Maria. Great to be here. I have, there's reason for optimism, and the other reason for optimism, of course, is that the Trump cabinet will not be fooled by Beijing. Trump, remember, had a lot of experience with President Xi in his first term. And one of the ways that they've gone into this recent round of talks is by opening up an investigation, the U.S. Trade Representative, into finding out to what extent the Beijing abided by that Phase 1 trade agreement. And there are problems with agricultural purchases, it seems, also with intellectual property theft, as well as tech transfers. So I think it's a very good way to go into these talks. The president and Xi Jinping, that the president is saying, look, we understand what happened during the first term, and we need you to keep your word this time. We understand what's going on. So yep. I think it's a very good setting for the president to be talking with Xi.
Well, President Trump walks a balance with Xi Jinping. I actually opened up my book on China a couple of years ago with the dinner that he had and hosted for Xi Jinping in Mar-a-Lago, where he had this delicious chocolate cake and was talking about this chocolate cake with Xi Jinping when they were having dessert. And while they were having dessert, Trump drops the bomb that they were sending strikes right then to Syria. So, you know, he takes a 1-2 punch with Xi Jinping. How did we get here, Lee? Because President Trump has been the first president to take this on, the intellectual property theft, the undermining that China consistently does against America. Isn't that right?
Well, that's what I write about in the book. That's what the China Matrix is about. This is a 50-year-long relationship between U.S. political and corporate elites and Chinese elites, and it's hurt the American people. And Donald Trump is the first president to identify this and to say, I'm going to do something about it. As he told you last week in your great interview with him, Maria, he said, yeah, it started with Nixon. You know, so it's been going on for more than 50 years. And that's really what the China Matrix is about. It's about this 50-year-long corrosive, destructive relationship that's really hurt Americans, that Donald Trump is the first president to say, we have to do something about it. And it's clear what the Chinese play is going to be here. They're going to try to outlast Donald Trump with the idea that whoever comes after Donald Trump is going to be easy to play because Donald Trump is the guy that they're worried about.
Yeah, and Scott Bessent this morning is suggesting that this threat of export controls on rare earth minerals will actually be off the table for at least a year as they look at it. He says, I believe they're going to delay the rare earth export controls for a year while they re-examine it. That's one of the reasons that President Trump walks lightly on this issue. We need those rare earth minerals, and they're refined in China. Once again, the U.S. reliant on the Chinese supply chain.
It's disastrous if you look at the different things. I mean, what everyone started to understand during COVID was how our pharmaceuticals depended on that supply chain heading all the way back, not just to China, but to Wuhan itself. Right? If you look at steel, if you look at the different strategic industries the Chinese have targeted over the last 50 years, and a lot of that has to do, again, with American corruption. Some of it has to do, of course, with just Communist Party corruption, that the Chinese have been able to subsidize these industries to destroy strategic American industries. So again, Donald Trump is the person we want. And Donald Trump has been talking about China for at least a quarter of a century, going back to his book, The America We Deserve. So this is the person we want representing us in dealings with what turns out to be not a challenge, not a competitor, but a strategic threat to our peace and prosperity.
Well, what do you think the Chinese are going to ask the Americans for if, in fact, they are relenting on this rare earth mineral export control for a year? What do you believe the U.S. is going to have to give to China if, in fact, they promise to make substantial soybean purchases, for example?
Well, as Donald Trump, I have a long interview with the president in the China Matrix. And, you know, one of the things he talks about how important tariffs were. Right. That the Chinese did not like the tariffs, and the tariffs were really, really important. So that's what they want. They want relief from those tariffs. That's the key point for them.
Real quickly, I want to switch gears and get your take on another subject that you wrote so eloquently about, and that is, of course, the Russia collusion lie. We watched for 10 years what they did to President Trump by making up that story. Do you believe it was conspiracy? Are you expecting more charges against Jim Comey with regard to conspiracy? And what about this referral of John Brennan this week?
Right, that referral coming from, I believe it was Congressman Jordan. So that's an important thing. You ask about the conspiracy charges and James Comey. I mean, the charges against Comey are real. People say, oh, it's nothing. If this was a Republican, if this was happening with Republicans, of course they'd be clamoring to hang Comey. But lying to Congress is a very serious thing. Obstruction is a serious thing. And Maria, I mean, you know, in lots of ways, you led this investigation. You would have Devin on and Kash on, and Kash is now the FBI director. There is no one who is better situated to investigate this. And you'll remember, I think that then Chairman Devin Nunes announced this on your show about the 8 different referrals that they sent the Department of Justice, one of which included a conspiracy charge. So with Kash Patel directing the FBI, knowing about that conspiracy charge, there's lots of optimism, or I'm very optimistic, and I think others should be too, that they are looking to build a much bigger conspiracy case.
Well, we, of course, would like to see accountability for sure. And on China, I really like the idea that the president did a deal with Australia on rare earth minerals. He is really gathering as many Asian allies as he can ahead of this meeting with Xi Jinping. Lee, great conversation. We so appreciate you, author of the new book, The China Matrix. Thank you. We appreciate your time.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Compagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.